All right, welcome to the show. Welcome to uh, Brian from watchyouare. Welcome to anybody watching right now. And let's see, Random Task is here. Omar is here. Tony and 9 people total. So, why are we here today? Well, we are here to talk about the future of Rolex pricing and the channel Watch You Are, which Brian runs, has an amazing video, and you want to start doing more videos, right? You want to get your channel sort of more up and running. Is that correct?
Yeah, I try to. Hi, Austin. I try to put out more stuff. Sometimes it's easier for me to motivate myself, and sometimes less. But yeah, I try to get the word out there. And I mean, you and I talked, and with the content that I upload, and I think to some extent it's also true for you. It's sometimes hard to have a wider audience, I guess, because we don't necessarily always have the most clickbaity stuff. But yeah.
I hear you, man. So, all right. So, a little bit of backstory. I made a video in a pool about Rolex prices, and I talked a lot about Bitcoin. Probably I put too much emphasis on Bitcoin. All right. And later on, I watched Brian's video, and his is much more well rounded, puts mine to shame. And the video blew me away. What he's going to do is he's going to share some slides, and hopefully, you guys can hear me and hear him, and let us know in the chat if things aren't going well. But do you want to give any sort of preface before we get into it, Brian?
No, I mean, listen, I'm happy to share some of the slides. The last thing I want to do is I don't want to bore anyone. So, I mean, happy to run through the slides. The video that I put out is 40 minutes, so I try not to go for that long, and maybe have it a bit more interactive. I mean, you and I, we chat, and maybe
Hmm.
there are questions from the audience, whatever.
Sounds good. All right, man. So, how do you want to do it? Shall I share your screen?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I uploaded here some slides, so yeah, exactly. So I hope
All
that
right.
works. So I'll just try to run you through that to those slides as quickly as I can. So basically, the idea was, a lot of people talk about Rolex prices, where they're going to head to, and a lot of people talk about Bitcoin, they talk about whatever, and basically the end question that we're trying to answer, or that I try to answer, is basically where will secondary market prices go to, and maybe before we can do that, maybe look at where secondary market prices are now, and how they developed, and what were some of the drivers of those secondary market prices. And I said, basically, if you want to understand secondary market prices, you have to understand list prices. And so I started out with list prices and took data. Again, it's not my data, you see the source below. Started in the end 50s up until today. Basically, you see, representative for the whole Rolex lineup, a couple of models. You see the GMT in stainless steel, the Daytona in stainless steel, and the Submariner. And then you see two precious metal options. So the Submariner date, and obviously this yellow gold, and then the yellow gold day date. And you can plot those prices, and you see those prices, they go in one direction, and one direction only, that's up. And then if you go ahead, I'll just leave the precious metal prices out, because the drivers behind those are different, gold prices, etc. So if you look at stainless steel, same story. And what you can do is you can add basically inflation. So you can use the CPI as a measure of inflation. You can index those prices and look at how they behave. And you basically, at first sight, you see, okay, not really a huge correlation, right? The inflation doesn't seem to be that high compared to Rolex prices over the long run. But if you
And just
zoom
to
in,
clarify, the
yeah,
CPI in red,
yeah,
that's the inflation.
exactly. And that's a measure for inflation. It's a consumer price index, exactly.
Okay,
And
that's really
so,
interesting to see that, because that's right off the bat, that's something that people talk about, when they compare old, 1960s prices on Rolexes. Oh, you got to adjust for inflation, and it's really hard to get your uh, head around, because inflation does change things, but when you look at those prices, wow, I mean, it's far surpassed inflation, hasn't it? Look at that. Okay.
Yeah,
That that's
absolutely. And I mean,
that's an
I
amazing, right there, because we so often just chalk it up to inflation and almost look at those like a one-to-one correlation, like they kind of follow but that's not true. Okay, anyway, continue. That's pretty staggering, that chart right there.
Yeah, and I don't claim to have the answer. I just have some ideas why things behave the way they did. And at first sight, as you said, you look at Rolex prices and they seem to be completely unrelated to inflation. But if you look at the era prior to 1980s, which is the highlighted era on the left, if you zoom in on that and you have again inflation in red, you see that at least during that time period, and this wasn't a time period where there was no inflation, and during that time period, the prices of Rolex models were basically following inflation. Inflation sits right in the middle, and so back then you could say prices went up just by the rate of inflation. And I think, and you see afterwards, I mean, this is not a God-given date here, 1978, 1980, but if you look at roughly at the period after 1980, you see that there's a sort of decoupling going on. Then again, I don't have the answer, but one of the reasons would be that something happened to the Rolex brand. And I would argue what happened was that prior to the 80s, Rolex sports watches were professional watches, were tool watches. So Rolex back then was a bit like Apple today, right? It's a premium product, state of the art technology, but not a luxury good. And you see some ads that represent, for what those watches were used back in the day, right? Um, and
Yeah, the
so if you
identity of the watches changed somewhere along there, which you're going to talk about. Let me ask a question real quick. The prices that you have on the chart, are those the retail prices or the market prices?
No, this is retail. So
Okay.
again, the ultimate end goal is to look at secondary prices, but in order to understand them, there's a couple of things that you have to look at, and I think number one are basically list prices or MSRP.
All right.
And yeah, and you see how those watches were used, right? The Daytona, my favorite model, it was used to basically track race cars, on a track, and the Submariner, of course, you used to take it diving. And I would argue at some point Rolex repositioned themselves. I don't want to make it too long, so I'll leave the details out, but they repositioned themselves from a tool watch manufacturer to a luxury watch manufacturer, jewelry company, if you will. And so if we jump ahead and you look at the period, let's say more or less last 20 years, '04 up until today, you again see inflation and the price development. And if we zoom ahead, because if you look on the right side of things, and this is what you said before, Austin, right? A lot of people talk about inflation. Oh, prices are going up because of inflation. Man, yes, inflation re-entered the market, and it's going to be interesting to see what will happen during that time. And what you see is basically that during that time when inflation came back, Rolex prices would basically adopt the slope of the price increase and basically rise at least at the rate of inflation. So long story short, Rolex prices always went up, but you can't rely only on inflation as a guide uh, in terms of where they're going. Rather, they serve as a price floor, because Rolex prices will always go up, at least at the rate of inflation, but mostly, for the most part, in the long run, at least, more than just that. And
Okay.
then you can walk away from list prices. Basically, that was a primer, and you can look at secondary market prices. And I picked a couple of models. I picked basically the Submariner Date and the Daytona stainless steel, and they serve, in my opinion, two different roles, right? I think the Sub Date is sort of a proxy of the somewhat hyped or in-demand Rolexes, but not the ultimate hype watch. And the Daytona obviously is the ultimate height watch. And then you can look at basically the predecessor, which was discontinued in 2020. So that's the 116610LN, and that's the watch. And you basically see the way that those secondary market prices developed. And long story short, in my opinion, there are two different eras during which you had completely different market behavior. Basically, the era before 2017, roughly 16, 17, and the era from 2016, 17 up until today.
Yeah, you
Simply
can
put,
right. You can see. I mean, from September 17, you can see something's happening there, whereas from from well, hold on. This okay. Yeah, yeah. Continue. Those are the years. Yes. Okay. So
exactly.
yeah, from I guess 2010 to 2016. Not. It's interesting. From 2010 to 2014, you you see hardly anything, and then from September 2014, you see that little bump, and then it starts to really go up. And you're going to get into it in a minute, but it's just kind of interesting because I got into watches 2013, and it's interesting because 2013 2014, something's happening. I wonder if media has anything to do with it and YouTube.
I think it did, but probably at a later point in time. I mean, again, I'm acting like I have the answers to all the questions. I don't. If you ask me, does the media and YouTube play a role? Absolutely, but I think it's
Wow.
going to kick in a bit later. Yeah,
Certainly
because
did
I
for me,
think
that's for sure. Okay. Yeah, but anyway, continue. I just think that's kinda interesting because, I yeah, I don't know how much we should attribute to YouTube, but if you're asking me, you should attribute it all to YouTube because if it wasn't for YouTube, I probably never would have even sort of realized watches. So it's kinda interesting. Anyway, continue.
no, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, I bought my first watch in 2007, and those were
Okay.
completely different days. And basically, up until 16, 17, you could buy those watches below list, right? You could get it on a secondary market at a discount. I remember I bought a rose gold Daytona in, I think it was early 2017. The watch retailed for 35K, and I got a brand new sticker for 25. And I was kind of pissed that I didn't pick it up at 24. So that was 20. That was 2017, right?
Yeah,
So and then things something somehow got crazy, and that's the watch, and you can basically see these are chrono prices, average prices. Yes, I know, this is not watch charts and they behave differently, but let's leave the details aside. Maybe we can answer
sure.
questions later. But you see that watch peaked in May 2022. You can look at the successor, which came out in 2020. This is the blue line. You can see that this is the new reference, looks very similar. And you see that this one peaked in March 2022, which was the time where I would say most of the Rolex market was actually peaking. And then you can obviously ask yourself, okay, why is there a difference? Well, because people anticipated that the old version would be phased out. That's the highlighted area. So prices went up just before, Watches and Wonders, or what was it, Basel World back then, 2020. And so the new one came out, and there's always people out there that have to have the watch, that have to be the first person that own the watch. And so there was this kind of a significant price difference between the new and the old. And then when that new one wasn't that new anymore, those prices dropped quite a bit, whereas the older version remained stable. And so that explains a bit why the still in production, the model is still in production, why it peaked earlier, and then the now discontinued model peaked a bit later, and remained, relatively speaking, a bit more stable. And so this is really the era when things got crazy. So roughly 2017 until today. You can do the same thing for the Daytona. Everyone knows the watch. Now the Daytona, however, it's a different story, because as I said before here, you could really get those things below retail, right, up until 17. And the Daytona, for a very long time, it traded always above retail. This particular model, anyway, was only introduced in 16. And so right out the gates, this one, went for a premium. You can see it also, peaked in March 2022. And, even when it came out, it was trading for roughly 1.5 times list. And then again, you see highlighted the era. Now, not just the 2017 era, but something happened. The flu, I guess, in 2020, and after that, things got really, really crazy. And this is more pronounced if you look at the Daytona than well, you also see it in the sub, but it's really, you can see it very nicely here in the
Yeah,
Daytona.
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
And
I
sorry.
remember when the Daytona came out, and people were talking about the. It was something like, what did it start off as? Something like 4 grand over retail, something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Yeah, we'll just hold off until prices taper down." It just never did. I guess,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess it's all relative. It seems to be tapering down somewhat, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely not going to hit like 2017 levels ever, ever. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the takeaways. I don't think we'll see anything before 2017. But yeah, I mean people talk about the market collapsing, and there's certainly quite a correction going on. But you can still see that that watch goes for more or less 2 times retail, and this is not a market meltdown, right? I mean, I remember my best friend. He bought his first watch in 2012. He wanted to have a Daytona. He told me, "Listen, I can't be bothered. Can you please take care for me?" And I was like, sure. I put him on the list. It told me 6 months. After 3 months, he got the call for the Daytona. So today is certainly another market meltdown. We are far, far away from waiting 3 months for a Daytona.
Yeah, and when
So
people talk about market meltdown, by the way, it's just you can't speak in that generalist sense because you have to divide it between pre-ceramic and ceramic, and then you have to really talk about the specific models. Because if you're talking about the Daytona or the Sub or the GMT, I mean, there's never going to be a meltdown. If you're talking about date justs and ladies date justs, which you can't really get in Japan now, there could be a meltdown. I mean, if you were stocking up on ladies date just because you had like a source last year, a couple of years ago, yeah, I mean, a meltdown is entirely possible. But yeah, it's never going to happen with certain models. But it's just interesting that people talk about a Rolex meltdown as like all of them are just going to go down. It really depends on the model and the period. So yeah.
absolutely. And I think, people say a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think we saw things developing in one way, and we're pretty much seeing the reverse happening now.
Hmm.
So some watches went over retail from the get-go, or let's say from 2017 early on, and then others followed, and then there was a trickle-down effect, so to say. Yeah. So yeah,
Agreed.
that's so basically the secondary market prices, and then you can look at basically the drivers behind secondary market prices. If you want to talk about this, I think number one is ultra loose monetary policy. You see the Fed rates here. That's basically so that's the interest rate level in the U.S. and it's basically, in other words, it's the price of money. And there's different stats out there, but you can say more or less the average long-term interest rate level will be around 5%. There's some people that say or it's more 4.6, 4.7. Others that say 5.2, 5.3. Let's keep it at those 5.2, 5.3. And then you can basically go ahead and say, okay, everything that's below that is cheap money. And it's really sort of an unprecedented era we're in. And you saw the Fed started hiking in late 2015, and then all of a sudden, again, we all know because of what, we had to reverse those rate hikes and go back to all-time low interest rates, basically free money. And now we're upping interest rates again, or the Fed is, but we're still below that average long-term interest rate level. And people for a long time said it's kind of weird because this is sort of an experiment. They said it's kind of weird. We have so much money in the system, but there's no inflation. And actually, there is inflation, or there was inflation long before 2021. And it wasn't the inflation of regular goods, but it was basically asset price inflation. And that this you see here very clearly. And again, a lot of people start with Bitcoin, but I think Bitcoin is it's one layer down, right? You have to
Hmm.
start, in my opinion, with interest rates. And so you can see here, the blue line is the S&P. You can see that on the left-hand scale, and Bitcoin on the right side in red. And you see again the era of 2017 up until today, and you can see what happened to the S&P. You made basically as of 2017. So if you started January 1st, I think I took that as a cutoff up until early 2023. And that factors in the correction that we had, right? You see on the right side, there was also already quite a bit of a correction. You would have made 1.7 times money with the S&P and over 20 times with Bitcoin. And obviously, if you invested earlier on, which a lot of people did, then you made a lot more money than that. And so I guess people had to do something with that money. And so if you look at, if you then again take those price levels and you index it and compare it to a Daytona here in light blue, you can see it kind of makes sense, right? It's, I would say the Daytona is more of a high octane sort of, juicier or spicier investment in the Rolex world, if you want to call it that. And if you compare it to the Submariner, you see it's a little less volatile, and yeah, so
Right. So
it
you got
fits the
the
picture.
Bitcoin price there, and then the S&P, and then yeah, you can see the relationship between those. I gotta say one thing that in my mind, and this depends on the person, but S&P seems to be more like long term investments, and I can't imagine that as many people would cash out to buy a Rolex watch, whereas Bitcoin is almost like it was found money, and it went up so much and so fast. It was like I think people spent it more willy nilly. I think that was one of the points I made in my video. Um, Whereas again, with stocks, I think people are a little bit more conservative. I mean, are there people that cash out of their stocks to buy a freaking watch? Yeah, maybe, but I think probably not as often as like the people that all of a sudden have like a Bitcoin that's worth 30 or 40,000 that they paid like $100 for. It's the
Yeah,
psychology of it.
absolutely.
It's sort of like the I won the lottery kind of thing. Whereas when the S&P as it's going up, I don't know, you probably aren't going to touch that as much. But anyway, just wanted to point that out.
No, absolutely. I think, the asset allocation or the people holding those two assets, are quite different from each other, right? You think the crypto bros who
Right.
just went
Totally
all in.
yeah,
Yeah, I
demographic
mean,
totally different. Yeah, as well.
I think one of the things they say to each other is I don't know when Lambo or whatever. So how long you have to hold this thing until you can buy a Lambo? I don't think that's the average question a guy that buys the S&P would ask.
No.
But yeah, I completely agree. So yeah, I think that's one of the drivers of secondary market prices. And the second driver, you touched upon it, is, in my opinion, the exponential, increase in social media adoption and the shift in the usage of it. So, in simple terms, a lot more people use social media, and they use it in a different way. You can see here the monthly active users of Instagram, 2011 till today. In 6 years, they added 650 million users. And then 2017, going forward, in 5 years, so less than 6 years, they added more than twice that amount, so 1.5 billion. And that's, so a lot more people are using it. But at the same time, they use it different. And I put some screenshots in here. This is how Instagram looked in 2011. This is the Instagram profile of Snoop Dogg. And I mean, it looks kind of boring, except maybe, as I said, for the pic that he has with Mrs. Zuckerberg in the first row, second to the right. And you can also see other Instagram profiles back in the day. And yeah, I say you could basically impress people if you took a picture of a funny looking coffee or something else. And then today, yeah, so if everyone fell asleep and
That
wants
was
to
back when
wake
the
up.
bar was low. Man, let me just interject and just say that I don't think that this phenomenon can be understated. This whole sort of like, look at me, look at what I have. When you get on social media and you mix watches in there, I mean, it causes people to buy things they never would have if they don't have to prove themselves on social media. It's weird because even having a YouTube channel, I mean, that influences my purchases. All of a sudden I'm thinking like, how will the viewers react to that? And that's something, if I didn't have a YouTube channel or a social media presence at all, that's just something that wouldn't even be a factor. It would just be all about you and your relationship with your watch, but it isn't for most people now.
Yeah, and I would argue you are a quote unquote normal person, right? I think there's a lot more people out there that are a lot more dependent on their image and how they're perceived on social media,
Uh,
right? I don't think you buy a watch, Austin, that you don't like, right? You maybe think about it, what other people think, but you like the, what is it called, the hydronaut? You wear it
yeah, right.
regardless, right?
Yeah, hydronaut, iconite. Yeah, those are exceptions. But yeah, every now and then I'll think about getting sort of a more popular watch that is sort of outside what I would like. Something like a two-tone watch, like a bluesy or a root beer, pre-ceramic root beer. And I think to myself, well, a couple things. It perhaps allow me to grow as aware and like introduce something new to me, and then also it would be something new for the channel as well. And the fact that I'm even having that conversation, it would be new for the channel. It would, yeah. Anytime that the channel is in the conversation, it's like, what are you doing? But it's just,
Yeah.
a fact that it is. So yeah. Anyway, continue with these pictures. It's nice eye candy there.
Yeah, I think there's some better ones coming, and also some maybe less than average. But no, so basically, 2011, I just showed you how it looked like on Instagram, and these days, much more sophisticated. And what I want to show with this is everyone is doing the same thing. So you have to do something, you have to own something, you have to be seen at a certain place, you have to go somewhere. And it's basically the same things, the same spots, the same restaurants, same clubs, same cars, same everything. And if someone has it, someone else has to have it too, and they have to show it off. And the creativity is really quite limited, right?
Mhm.
Um, I mean, yeah, okay. The one on the right is probably worth looking at. I can't zoom in here, but
Yeah, I think we've
so
got our thumbnails for the future thumbnail. I'll have to snap this.
yeah, maybe wait. You should snap this one because
Maybe
what
not.
I wanted. No, but what I wanted to show with this is maybe for Mark Goldberg. I don't know, but no.
Yeah,
So what I wanted to show with this is not just women that do this; it's also men. And it's kind of, I mean, it's so absurd, those two, like she on the left and he on the right, they look like they're on the date in the same spot. I mean, everyone's doing the same thing. And yeah,
yeah,
so this has been in the Middle East. I'm based in Switzerland. Same shit, different place. It's a global phenomenon.
mm.
Again, lots of creativity here. I flipped through all of that. Again, also guys doing.
Sarcasm noted.
Yeah,
Creativity.
and
So
this I really I said it in my video. I think I took screenshots like an idiot, and at first I thought, man, I took the same screenshot twice, but no, this is these are two different people. Obviously, the two ladies on the left. You see the level of creativity here, and yeah, you see lots of different things. I'm gonna skip through that. That's not so relevant. But I showed this because I believe if you like watches, it it has an influence on our hobby as well. And then you have your Instagram discover page or whatever they call it, and it looks something like this. And you see what famous people are wearing, and yeah, lots of different stuff. I said, more important, less important people. And you see people flexing, right? I mean, yeah, I don't know, might be a watch deal or whatever. And then you have even people telling you, yeah, your money is saved in Rolex, and basically are pushing it as an investment. So not just as a flex, but basically also as an investment. And that brings us
yeah.
basically to the next topic. Yeah, I don't know if you want to
Well,
say
I'll just say
something.
that I mean it's completely weird, and it's weird because everybody knows it's strange to sort of go for the adoration of people you don't even know. Chase freaking likes. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, and we all know it doesn't make any sense, but it's such a part of the culture now, and it's so odd. But yeah, duly noted. What it's. I mean, I don't want to go completely old man and back in the day, people worried about the people around them, the people important to them. But it's just worth stating. All right, yeah, okay,
No, I completely agree, and I think we can think about what luxury means, and luxury means different things to different people. I think luxury is something that's rare, and I
yeah,
think back in the day, what was rare was information, right? You wanted
absolutely,
to have
absolutely.
information as quickly as possible, and nowadays you have too much information. So I think nowadays the luxury is probably not to be flooded with all that noise, and to only get what's really relevant to you. So what I'm trying to say is I think at some point we will see a peak, and people will stop oversharing, right? I mean, not everyone's Kim Kardashian, and every, I don't know, every Britney who works at the nail salon has to post, a picture of her Starbucks in the morning, and no one really gives a damn because she's irrelevant. And I think at some point people will realize that. But
Yeah, I
I
don't know
think,
because I think the whole fake it till you make it thing and sort of nobody looks at the behind the scenes thing and that's what people jealously guard and hide and stuff. Um,
yeah, and
there's
even
one
that,
more
I
point.
mean, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's I don't want to hijack the point you're making, but in a video I said I think the popular models in the future are the ones that are popular now, and I think it's because you get a lot of reaffirmation from celebrities. It's like the sub. The sub is a classic. It was always a classic, and 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 it's like if you're a celebrity, that's what you would go for. And it's why something like the Iconaut or the Hydronaut, they will never become anything. They're not like sleepers, is what I'm saying. And even I think that yeah, could it be could it be discovered? I don't think it ever would. The only way this watch could ever be popular is if it was featured in like a movie. It was like
Mhm.
on Tom Cruise's wrist as he plays this character, and Hodinkee writes an article about it, and then people, that's the
Yeah.
only that was the only way this watch would be popular because there's no way that this watch could hold up to something like the Sub or the GMT or the Daytona on a celebrity's wrist in this culture. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, the reason why those watches are where they are is because one, they're icons and they have a rich and long history, and two, because as you said, someone sports them and then they become a overnight phenomenon. I mean, you got the John Mayer Daytona, right? I never understood that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a different topic. Yeah, but no,
it
I
is.
agree.
A good thing that you said worth highlighting as well is the information out there because back in the day, you didn't have the internet. I guess you would have to buy the expensive watch books, and it's just not something that most people would do. It was almost like a realm of dealers and collectors, and you probably had to pay your dues. These days, you can spend a day researching submariners, and literally, and like by the end of the day, you can talk like an expert, and that just wasn't the case in the past. And I think it introduced a lot of almost like what was previously well guarded information just to like lay people. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's the internet
no,
is to thank for
100%. I
that.
mean, when I first looked into watches, it was the early 2000s. I browsed some magazines, not even watch magazines, but you had to basically, had to move your ass, so to say, to a shop, buy a magazine, and you picked up something, like some information you could Google, and you went into a forum, right? But social media was next level, took that whole thing to the next level, and I think what I always say is important to understand that 6-digit references behave different than 5-digit, and 5-digit references behave different than 4 digits
Mhm.
for different sort of reasons, right? I think, now everyone, a lot of people thankfully buy their watches just to wear them, but a lot of people have a fully stickered Hulk in their vault or more than one waiting, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years, right? And
Yeah,
that wasn't
yeah,
the case with the 5 digits, and
no,
certainly wasn't the case in the 4 digits, right? I said in the video that those vintage Daytonas, they are worth so much, the ones that are unworn, because people were really wearing those watches back then. They were tool
hmm
watches, that's what they used them for, and they, like a car, they brought them to service, right? and
hmm
and then um and then also people didn't baby them or put them in the safe just as an investment. That was unheard of, because again, back then no one wanted to have those exotic dial Daytonas anyway. But yeah, I mean, maybe talking about the third driver here, you don't have to, be able to read all the details here, but I wanted to say, speculators and people that treat watches as an investment, purely as an investment, they also drive the market. And I think what's important to understand is, different people enter the market at different times for different reasons. People that liked watches were there from the beginning. More people entered because of social media. They really started liking watches. Prices went up. People that liked watches started flipping them on the side because they could sell them above list. And that attracted other guys. If you had a friend who bought a sub, sold it the same day, and you're not into watches, you're like, okay, that guy just made 2K. I might do the same thing again as well.
Mm.
And then at the end of the day, you had people that are purely speculators, right? And so I
Right,
think
right.
this is an important driver. And what I tried to do here, you get the three Samaritan dates, current production left, previous model ceramic in the middle, and the one before that, the pre-ceramic on the right. And you can see that they were produced for different time periods. So the current production was introduced in 2020, the one in the middle in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, yeah. And then the 16610, the pre-ceramic, was introduced in 1989. And I just wanted to give some sort of rough indication of how many speculators are within a given market. And you can basically look at all the listings again. These are screenshots from Chrono, and you can see, this is a coincidence. The two ceramic pieces had the exact same number of listings, of 558 each. And then you got the pre-ceramic on the right, and you can see how many of those listings are new unworn and how many have been worn. Now, of course, the older the watch, the more people would have worn the watch, right?
Right.
But what's interesting is that the ceramic in the middle was introduced in 2010. So if you think back to what we discussed before, back when the market was still normal, because it only got started going crazy in 2017. So it's been in production for a whole 7 years, where you could basically get it below list. And the one on the left was only introduced in 2020. So right, basically peak market craziness. And so what I did is, it's not to be taken too seriously.
No, I
I
love this. I think this is so clever, by the way. I was blown away
That's
by
awesome.
this. All right.
No,
Continue.
but it's a fancy way of showing something which is really not that complicated. You basically, this is the WSA, as I call it. You take the number of new unworn pieces and that are listed and divide it by the total number of listings. So it's basically a percentage, a ratio. So it's going to sit between 0 and 1. And if you have a ratio of 1, that means basically the market is purely speculative, because all the listings or all the pieces that are sold are new and unworn. And
Mhm.
if it's a 0, then all the pieces that are being sold are basically worn pieces, so no speculative activity at all. And then you can look at those three models, and this is really all that matters. You see those ratios, and again, you have to adjust for how old those models are, you know, different things that happened back then. But roughly speaking, you can see a huge difference between the one on the left, 0.64, and the one in the middle, 0.2 roughly. That's 3 times as many, speculators in the current production model.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
just
why
to
would you
clarify,
basically?
because sometimes people aren't so good with numbers. So the closer to 1 it is, the more speculative it is, and the closer to 0 it is, the less.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
And so
so
why would you? I mean, the one on the left is introduced in 2020. So why would, out of this, what is it, 560 people roughly, why would 360 people sell a watch that they never wore? It's
right.
purely for speculation.
Mm.
And this is something that's somewhat absent for the one in the middle, the 116610. And yeah, the one on the right, again, when this one was phased out in 2010, the internet was there, the forums were there, and people knew that Rolex would move from aluminum bezels to ceramic bezels. The GMT already had that transition. And so there were a couple people, the guys that really liked watches, that bought them for themselves, one to put away, or maybe even one, speculating that it will go up. But today it's a completely different story.
No, I mean, it's almost like back in the day, like 20 years ago, The idea of safe cleaning a watch, it would just who would do that? I mean, it would really have to be like a collector or like somebody with OCD who just like one wants that perfect example. Now it's almost like it's more the exception than the rule to buy a watch and wear it. And I would say most
Exactly.
people, yeah, and apparently, like in Tokyo, about 100 people walk in and try to buy a watch, and out of those 100 people, I would say probably 95 have no intention of wearing the watch, probably no interest in the watch. They just know that if they can get that watch, they can make thousands. And so you're going to see that number get closer to one as things progress, I would say, with the new pieces. And I think less and less people are going to, well, I don't know. It depends on what the market does, but assuming
Yeah.
it's like it was in 2021, then yeah, it's gonna just you're gonna see more and more unworn pieces, depending on what model it is. It's sports models, of course.
Yeah. And yeah, then so the next driver, as I call, is the ever-growing watch community. So, and I show here YouTube, but basically, a lot more people are into watches today than compared to, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, because again, people, were made aware of that this exists. And what I think is important is not just the amount of people that have one watch today, but the number of people that own more than one watch is way, way higher today than 10, 15 years ago. I mean, it's not normal for everyone to have more than one Rolex. And it also doesn't make sense, right? And I say some more detail, I go into more detail in my video, but you see a couple guys here on YouTube. I'm going to be, listen, I mean, I do this for fun. I don't earn a buck on this anyway, so I'm going to be very straightforward. This is not my day-to-day job, so I can be as direct as I want to. These are not necessarily the sort of people right here that I like. I think for various reasons, right? I think, again, on the left side, you have to go and flex and tell people you have a 140K watch collection after 2 years. The one on the right says how I tricked the AD into selling me a Rolex. The one on the bottom right, says 2023 Rolex releases. I'm going to unveil the newest Rolex models. And then the last word says, oh, it's just a prediction. It's clickbait all over, but it's, the community grew a lot. And yeah, I think you see people here, that are not necessarily representative of the quote unquote typical watch buyer. And that doesn't always have to be the case, of course, but I just think we're going in the wrong direction here. But basically, bottom line, more people like watches, and a lot more people have more than one watch compared to 10, 20 years ago.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it would be if you met somebody and they said, "Yeah, I'm into watches. I love Rolex," and they said, "I've got one," you would be like, "That's all." It would be kind of weird just to find a watch enthusiast with one watch.
Exactly. And listen, I mean, I refuse to call myself a collector because I mean, I have a couple watches, but to me, a collector, I say it in a provocative manner, and I don't mean it 100%, the way I say it. But to me, a collector is a guy that has, I don't know, 100, 200 pieces, Getreide, whatever the guy is called, who owns the One Oak collection. If you want to Google that, he had a hard time reducing his exhibition to 160, 170 pieces. Um, and yeah, at the same time, I think you can be a quote unquote watch collector if you only have one watch, right? Because I think at the end of the day, it's the journey. If you started out, if you started to build, if you start to understand what you like and you don't like, and then you can come back to having one watch and one watch only. And so
Yeah,
I think it's equally respected, to your point.
it's interesting because I mean, I bristle at that term too. I would never call myself a collector, and it's kind of weird to say that because clearly, like you and I both have a collection of sorts. I view myself as a one watch guy that hasn't settled on his one watch and is still trying to figure it
Interesting.
out with like the five in front of me. And it's like I'm really a one watch guy, but it's just like I haven't figured out which of these I like, and I'm still thinking about it. And I wanted to get in before prices rose too high.
But
By
that's
the way,
interesting. So are you planning
you
on
can
redu-?
no, I was just gonna turn on the heat real quick, but ask a question before I do that.
No, I just want to ask, are you planning to reduce to one watch at some point?
Ideally, I would love to do that, but
Interesting.
I don't think I can. I mean, I think the idea of selling a piece and then watching it go up and the regret and maybe that's not the one I should have sold. I
Yeah.
mean, I've never sold a piece period because of that. Even the Seiko 5s, it's like, I get on the right up to putting them on eBay or something, and then I'm like, yeah, I don't know how will I feel, 10 years or not 10 years, but like next year when I'm missing those Delphine hands or something like that. Anyway, continue. Say something for the viewers while I deal with the heating situation here. I'll be right back.
Sure. Okay, so let me think. Yeah, so what I was going through are basically the drivers of secondary market prices. And so the next thing, there's a couple of additional drivers. List prices obviously always going up will have an influence on secondary market prices. You could, in simple terms, if the list price goes up, the secondary market price should also go up. There's not a one-to-one correlation, but let's say a watch always trades at a discount of 10%, and then you increase the list price by 5%, you would sort of see somewhat of a upward drift on secondary prices as well. And then of course, if a model gets discontinued, instantly the supply is reduced, and the demand might be even increase at the same time. And I think what's very important is what I call spiraling or knock-on effects, that everything we talked about can't be just looked at individually or in it by itself. It's relevant, but it's also intertwined. So I said before, social media drives more people into the watch hobby. Okay, that's one thing. And then prices go up, and then people start flipping them and prices go up higher, and then new people start only flipping and prices go up even further. So everything has basically a knock-on effect, and I think that's very important. So a lot of
Absolutely.
stuff to consider as well. And then so where do we go from here? There's obviously also stuff we need to consider. So of course, interest rate, monetary policy, a lot of stuff I talked about that was relevant in the past will also be relevant in the future. The state of the economy, of course, a looming recession, whether we'll have one or not, what is a recession, different story, and how pronounced will it be and everything. And yeah, I talked about list prices again, also in the context of inflation as well. And I think more importantly, supply versus demand overhang, right? So you can look at the supply side of things and the demand side of things. So supply side first, maybe looking at production capacity and the artificial scarcity. Um, a lot of people on YouTube tell you that Rolex was artificially limiting supply. I don't buy this. I think that's
Yeah.
wrong. I think they were producing as much as they could. Historically, they did that. If you look at the Daytona, they could have produced, more steel Daytonas. They just decided to put the 4130 into the precious metal ones because they had a higher margin there. And also, Rolex was buying back stock in the past when you had,
Oh,
crises in the various countries. And they even have, if you look at the AD agreements, they have the right of first refusal. So if an AD goes belly up, then Rolex has the right of first refusal to basically buy back all the stock.
interesting.
Um,
I didn't know that. Huh.
yeah, I think you can, if you Google it, you see it in the US. There's some agreements that you can view. I think between Rolex USA, I think it is, and DADs. And I think there were situations. I think probably even in Asia a couple of years back where they were buying back stock. So they know how to manage inventory, because first and foremost was what Rolex wants to do. Obviously, is they want to protect their brand. And if at some point Rolexes are still seen as an investment, even to the people that just buy them for fun, right? But at
Hmm.
some point, if Rolex would start losing their value, they could basically shut down the store and they're completely done. So they're watching this very carefully and have a very, very long-term view. So that's
Yeah.
the supply side of thing. And yeah, I don't. Sorry, Austin, do you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say that. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there are more people that think that Rolex is artificially limiting supply than think that they actually just can't keep up with demand. But Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I know somebody who knows somebody within Rolex, and they say we just can't keep up with the demand. It's enormous. But I think it's a popular opinion, and it makes people feel better to point to Rolex as like the bad guy, and this is the reason why you can't get a watch because they got a bunch of billionaires sitting in a warehouse, and they're just dribbling them out to manipulate the market, and they're the bad. There are bad players, and it's the middlemen. I mean, if anybody who is upset because they can't get a Rolex, obviously is directing their anger at the very top, Rolex, but it's the
Yeah,
authorized dealers that are standing in the way, and they're the real bad
yeah.
guys. They're the middlemen. They're the drug dealers. And when you see somebody, one guy who wants one watch, and you see another guy, and you'll see him all the time on YouTube talking about it, who have like 10 watches from an AD that they have a good relationship with. Okay, that's the AD that's the issue. It's not Rolex. But anyway, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, that's a completely different. Sorry.
And yeah, go ahead.
No, that's a completely different topic, I think, which is interesting maybe for another time, right? How they deal with those wait lists and why doesn't Rolex do more about it? And there's a lots of conspiracy theories also when the new warranty cards came out. A lot of people would say they make things even worse because on the new cards you can't see who the AD is. But I think
Mhm.
Rolex is not in part of a conspiracy theory, right? I think the reason they did this is very pragmatic. You had, at least in Europe, I think it's called GDPR or something like that, European data protection rules, right? And I think it had to do with that as well, that you can no longer put your name on the card and see the dealer, etc. But anyway, so what I wanted to say before, supply versus demand. At the end of the day, you want to know, is there more supply than demand, or is there more demand than supply? And I think as of now, Rolex is producing at capacity, full capacity. They're trying to, basically build new factories and stuff, but that's going to take time.
Yeah.
And if you look at
Can
the
I
demand
address
side of things,
one? Sorry to interrupt you, but
no,
there's
no,
a
go.
pretty interesting comment right here. I'm just going to highlight it. The ADs are Rolex's responsibility. I mean, I agree with you. They should be, but they just can't do anything. It's like having really bad kids just running amok, and the best they can do is choose the worst of the worst, and and take their distribution license, or take make it so they can't distribute the watches anymore, take away their authorized dealer status, but they can't do that. And it's almost like the the ADs have enough power that as long as they're not doing, you know, selling out the back door, they can get away with quite a lot, and Rolex really can't do much. I mean, think about what happened with CD Peacock, right? I mean, CD Peacock, I don't know if you remember the story, but to make a long story short, there was I think like she was a foreign exchange student from China who was working at an authorized dealer, and she was basically just buying the pieces herself, selling them to people on Facebook, and they got busted. There were whistleblowers involved, and CD Peacock never lost their license. They're still, I think that branch closed, but see, they kind of like move locations or something like that. But I mean, that you can't get much more gratuitous than that. A bad player within the authorized dealer, but they still, Rolex didn't, I guess, didn't or couldn't do anything. So yeah, while I agree with Mark's sentiment there, it's like they're just they can only do so much. So
Yeah, but at the same time, I think they are already doing a lot. If you think about it, these are just retailers, and they have to comply with so many rules and regulations to be able to sell Rolex. I mean, they are telling the retailer to basically take off the stickers and which piece to give you and which not. So they're very anal. Some ADs, they won't give you the wide outer sort of box. What is it,
yeah.
the
Oh,
sleeve?
interesting. Okay.
Other guys, they don't give you the bezel protectors. Again, other guys don't give you the. I don't have the white hang tag for a couple watches that I bought. And so
Interesting.
because they dictate this to the retailers. And can you, if you go to a supermarket and you buy some napkins, right? They're not going to tell you, you know, what you are able to do with it, when you're able to put the sticker off, whatever, you know. So it's kind of, we're already, I don't want to say a religious tribe, but you know, in some way Rolex is already doing quite a bit. And I'm not saying they couldn't do more, or they couldn't do it, or they couldn't do it differently, but they're already, if you think about the whole thing, I mean, it's a free market, and if you think about it from that perspective, they're doing quite a bit.
Yeah. By the way, at the end of the day, from what I understand, the authorized dealers, when they pay for these watches, they're the authorized dealers' watches to do with what they please. And so Mark, he responds back. He says, "Yes, they can. They can trace where the watches go. Yes, they can do that. But I think the best they can do is probably call up that AD and say, "Hey, man, you know, a lot of your stock is winding up on, you know, this gray market site, and can you not do that?" And you know, think what the authorized dealer would say. I mean, we can't control what our customers do. That's really what the response would be. And so when Mark says and ADs can be easily replaced, I don't think they can be easily replaced. I think it's pretty hard to pull somebody's authorized dealer status, especially when it's just like, you know, it's not the authorized dealer that's selling them. It's the customers. And so the authorized dealer, once that customer walks out of the door, they really can't be
Well, I
held
mean,
responsible.
there are ADs that are bundling them up and selling them out to the back door, right?
That's
But I
true.
think
That's true.
what they also
Which I
want to,
don't
they
think
want to have.
is, yeah. I mean, that's gratuitous, and I guess that was my point, that they can they can find those guys maybe and punish them. But you know, if you have a situation where you're Rolex and you know this authorized dealer, their pieces just keep winding up on the gray market, you really can't do much about it, because all they have to say is, well, you know, we sell to people that we think are going to keep the watches, and they don't keep the watches, and you know, it's just not something Rolex can force an authorized dealer to do. So yeah, I don't think they're really, yeah. And there's tons of authorized dealers all over the world, so it's like they have to be really careful. I just don't think it's as easy as just like, okay, you're gone. Next guy in line. Okay, you get the distributorship. Okay, you over there. They can't police like that anyway. I just think it's
And I
yeah,
think the
too much to
reason also
expect.
part of it is they want to have consistency, right? And they, Rolex is not a brand that's gonna, you know, struggle to do one thing or the other. They just want to have something. They have a plan and they do it consistently. And if you take away a license from someone, it's a big thing. And you have to find a replacement, right? And it's going to take ramp up time for the guy
Yeah.
to build the store, hire the people, educate them, etc., right?
Mhm.
So I think that's part of it as well. Should I talk a bit about the other, the remainder of the factors, maybe?
Yeah, go for it.
So we talked about supply, but at the end of the day, you want to know if there's more supply or more demand. And if I think you need to look at the demand side of things. And as I said before, different people entered the market at different times for different reasons. And so what I think will be very hard to do is to undo social media. I think that genie can't be put back into the
No.
bottle. So what happened through social media, in other words, you had a huge demand overhang. So supply, I always say, Rolex supply was quite steady. They were producing always a little bit more, 800, 900,000 watches, a million, maybe a bit more. But the demand side of things just was totally went out of control and created such a huge demand overhang. And I think part of that demand will go down, and it can go down for various reasons, right? I think the first guys that will disappear are the pure speculators, because and then that's going to again depend on the different models, but the less money you can earn, you know, the more people will try to basically buy and flip them, right? And then all the guys that I showed you before that basically, you know, own more than one watch and build a huge collection in like 1 or 2 years. At some point, they maybe realize, oh, the watches aren't worth as much as they used to be. Maybe I'll sell one or two. If you factor in a recession and people can meet their payments, they're probably even forced to do that stuff. So it's not idiosyncratic decision, but they're forced. It's an exogenous factor, if you will. And maybe also we now have the flex culture. More is better. Maybe there's, and I saw that, I should have listed that down below. Maybe there's a new societal trend, right? So maybe it's a new minimalist trend that people only buy what they totally need. You never know, right? And these are
Yeah, yeah,
basically all the factors. And yeah,
yeah. I think that the last one, the social trends. I mean, I think that can't be overstated because, yeah, the flex culture and right, like a worldwide minimalist movement, something like that. Or I've always thought about what would really see Rolex tank. I mean, kind of across the board, like, and uh, it would really mean the brand would have to become uncool.
yeah,
What would that mean? I guess like if minimalist movement started and you feel like an ass wearing a Rolex, like you feel stupid, you feel untrendy. It's like the complete opposite now. It's like you put it on, it's like, yeah, this is a really cool watch. It feels like it brings you up in a way, whether it does or not. That's a different story,
yeah.
but that's what it feels like. But I
And
guess if
I
it just
think,
became really, really uncool, and however that would happen, I don't know if there was like some scandal with Rolex executives and they were doing like horrible things behind the scenes or something. And it just like it tainted the name of the brand to the extent to where like nobody would even, it became like
yeah,
just a liability. And just like I said, not a cool watch to have on. I just can't really see that happening, but I guess that in my mind is the only thing that could really stop the trendiness of it.
exactly. I mean, if you think about the Paul Newman Daytona, let's think about if there would be a Jeffrey Epstein Hawk,
Oh, right,
you
right.
know,
Something like that.
something
Right.
like that. And well, that's not going to happen anymore, I guess. But yeah, and at the same time, I think talking about pop culture and trends and stuff, 20 years ago, it was all about decadence. And whether you were poor or rich, people tried to look rich in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. And then 2016, 17 going forward, I think there was more of a hipster culture. People, whether they were rich or not, tried to look, I don't want to say poor, but not like rich or not decadent. So that factor already exists today. But I think what made the difference is just that social media opened the floodgates and brought so many new people into the hobby, regardless of the current trend. But
Mhm.
still, there could be a new trend that would basically flip everything upside down, right? Yeah, if that makes sense.
It does. Let me just highlight this one comment because he random task says, or at this
Yeah.
point, get robbed of it. And that's something that you hear every now and then, like that, oh, that could be the end of Rolex. People are too scared to wear them, which is kind of funny because it's just because people are too scared to wear them doesn't mean that they wouldn't want them. They're just not going to wear them in dangerous places. And that kind of just goes to the desirability of it. So it's almost like the more dangerous it's almost like a cyclist, like the more dangerous they get, uh,
Mhm.
the more desirable they are. You know what I mean? That's what's driving the danger in wearing one. So anyway,
Yeah, no, I think that's the flip side of social media. Nowadays, every guy who can barely write his own name knows, oh, this is a hog. Yeah, so does the same guy who's in the business of robbing people. I think that's the
yeah,
flip side.
I don't
Yeah.
think the danger is going to affect the popularity of Rolex, but it certainly affects the enjoyment of wearing them and sort of the practicality of having one and ownership, and pretty detrimental to that. But it's not. I just don't think people will ever say, I can't even wear these watches, and they hold their value, and they're beautiful, but I just I don't I want to wear them and not keep them in my safe. So I'm going to sell them all. You know what I mean? I don't think that's going to happen
Yeah,
anyway.
and also if you're really at the point where everyone's going to be robbed of their Rolex, I think then we have other issues in society, and I think then law enforcement has to come up with the plan anyway. And there's a difference between wearing a full gold Rolex in a T-shirt, in Brazil, versus
Right.
wearing a stainless steel one beneath your underneath your hoodie, in a safe area where no one sees it, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, it can have an impact. I agree, but I mean, I don't think this is gonna be the end of
Yeah.
Rolex.
I mean, this is a tangent and it's another topic, but it's a topic close to my heart because when I got into watches in 2013 and 2014, wearing the steel pre-ceramics just really it just wasn't a big deal. It was still really safe, I felt. I don't know, maybe it was just a perception thing. Now, it just doesn't feel like it. And it feels like I haven't changed at all. And the way I want to wear my watches hasn't changed at all, but like the environment has. And it's really detracted from that. Anyway, that is a different topic, but just worth talking
No,
about.
no, absolutely. And what I said before about all these new guys that entered the market, those YouTube guys that I showed, I said in my video, these are the exact people that some people wanted to get away from, and which is why that drove them into the watch hobby. And now everyone knows what's on your wrist, right? Including the people you don't want to know. But yeah,
Right.
so what I did then, I don't have the crystal ball, of course, but I tried to put together, what to expect for this year. And I said, of course, depends on the speculative aspect of each individual market. So the more speculators that are in a given market, we saw that indicated before, the higher the risk of this collapsing. Overall, I don't think that prices are going to go back to levels before 2017. So they're going to land somewhere between 2017 and today. Also, if you look in terms of relative premium, that is being paid. And so that means if list prices have gone up, you would have to factor that in as well, and that will make those prices even higher. So depending basically on the economy, news flow, prices could drop from where they are now to anywhere between 2020 to 2017. If there are no negative news overall, they could probably stay where they are, which would be more or less 2021 levels. And then I would say the precious metal models are probably the ones that are mostly expected to trade around list price and probably the first to drop because, again, think about the Daytona. What happened? Watch came out in 16, traded for 4K premium, got higher, 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 and at some point it didn't just trade for 2 times retail, but it traded for the price that you would actually pay for a precious metal version. And then people said, oh,
Mm.
I should probably rather get this one. And then the speculative activity also shifted to this one. And if you're a flipper and you buy a watch for 40K, that's a significant amount of money, right? And so the ROE, the return on equity, so the money you will be making on those 40K, relatively speaking, will be lower than what you could make on a stainless steel Daytona, where you only have to pay, what is it, 14, 15K list price, right? So I think these will be the first ones that will drop for the most part. There will be exceptions, of course. I think the Daytona and stainless steel will continue to demand a significant premium. Again, think about it, what I said before, 10 years ago, you could get it for more or less list, but I think those days are gone. I think the GMT will also go significantly above retail.
Yeah.
Submariner date or without date as well, also a bit above retail. Explorer 2, Explorer 1, probably retail bit more, and then they just for the most part they will go at retail or below, and then you got the shitters as Archie would call them, the 28 mil Pearl Masters and stuff like that. I mean, this stuff will not go above retail, and that's basically the rising tide lifts all boats story, which will be reversed.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with that. Yeah, and I really should stop by ADs to see if there are any here in Japan. I don't think there will be, by the way, here in Japan. Um, but yeah, Datejusts and ladies' pieces are things that you would expect to see. But you know what I think is you're going to see, at least here in Japan. I think even if they have those watches in the safe, ready to go, anybody can get them. I don't think they're ever going to put them out like they did in the past. Like I think that might be I think having watches in the case, at least here in Japan, might be a thing of the past because for a
You
couple
think
reasons.
so?
Yeah, because I think I think it forces people to ask about specific pieces And I think that's number one reason. And so, ideally, if if you have the piece that's just sitting right there, somebody could buy it who doesn't really want it. Whereas if a person has to, specifically ask for one piece, then they really want it. So it's a way to sort of vet potential speculators. And another reason I think is more deceptive. I think it creates the illusion that it's a special watch, and it's almost like, I think, even when a watch is selling at or below retail, they'll be able to sell a few by saying, "Oh, that one model that you just mentioned, we do have that one right there," when they have actually like 10 back there, and they put it in front of the
But
guy, and it just creates that illusion of like, well, wow, I mean, this is really special. I stumbled upon this piece. There could be 10 back there, 10 ladies pieces back there, but you know uh, it's like if you walk into an AD and they've got 10 ladies pieces right there, you're going to say, I'm not touching those. But if they have none, and they say, we do have this one ladies piece, even though there's 10 back behind, more people are going to jump on that because they're going to think, I'm lucky. So I think, and the
Austin,
whole,
I
go ahead.
no, sorry, go ahead.
I was done.
Okay. No, I didn't want to interrupt. I just want to say, to your point, I think this is a transitory phenomenon. Um, the ADs will refuse to let people know that they have stock to keep the dream alive,
Yeah.
but only
Yeah.
for so long. At some point, they want to shift product, and then they will put it in the window because that's what the window is for. And I think that's similar to the behavior to all those dealers. Go to YouTube, go on Instagram. A lot of guys will, at least a couple of weeks back, will want you to believe that the market hasn't really tanked. And they refuse to write off their pieces because they have
Mhm.
inventory and because they bought them at high prices. But they can only do it for so long. At some point, when people know that things really dropped, I think they're forced to move them. But yeah, it's I don't know. You know,
I agree with that. I think
yeah,
the ADs. I think the gray market is definitely in denial, and the ADs will be in denial. I think Japanese ADs, and I only speak about Japanese ADs because that's the only thing I know. Um, yeah, they can still get away with not having anything in the case, and I think they're going to be in denial for a while. Anyway, continue your point. I think I interrupted you.
no, you didn't. And I think it's going to be really interesting because I don't know how it is in Japan, but over here, a lot of ADs, acquired a certain attitude and they forgot who the client is and, what role the client usually has in such a relationship, right? And I think it's going to be interesting to see the change in tone. But again, I don't think they will be, offering you a stainless steel Daytona at a discount
No,
tomorrow
no,
or
no.
anytime soon. But yeah, yeah, I would expect to see at least someday just sitting in the case, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's the whole story about those exhibition only pieces and how those are being treated. I think it's also as a topic for itself. Some people say that Rolex at some point tells the ADs that they can sell those or whatever. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think yeah.
right. So I think it depends on the country, because here in Japan, I I I think the pieces, they must be locked, or I think they're real pieces, but they're
The
the time
movement.
says 1010, and it's always at like the second hand is at 31. And whereas in Thailand, if you watch my videos from Thailand, those display pieces were ticking at times, and you could try them on. And so I have a feeling that yeah, those pieces that I tried on in Thailand of the Sprite, like those will eventually just be sold when they get another Sprite in stock.
Yeah.
And you know, Captain Danny, who he writes for Rolex magazine, he was back in his hometown in France, and I don't know if the ADs still do this, but when a piece comes in, if you're on the list for it, they'll call you and they'll say, okay, your piece is in, but we're going to keep it a month so people can try it on. Is that okay? And if it's not okay, you say, well, no, no, it's not okay. Well, we can't sell you the watch. If it is okay, you just have to wait a month where, oh, well, people like me paw at it and wind it and put it on my wrist and get my DNA all over it, which is really weird if you think about it, because you get your watch and you know that countless people tried it on. Very
Yeah,
odd.
100%. And when you're talking to a legit psycho over here, so I think I had situations when I told people when they called me that my watch was here, I told them please just put it away. I don't want anyone to touch it. And they already knew how crazy I was, and then so they said, yeah, I already put it aside. So 100% in your camp, yeah.
Let me ask you,
No, it's
where you are, what can you get at the authorized dealer? Because here in Japan, you can get nothing. You can go in there and say, look, I'll buy anything that tells the time, anything. They'll just shake their head. Can you buy anything where you are?
I mean, I don't visit the ADs on a daily basis. I think you will probably be able to get some weird, super small watch. But I mean, I don't even know if it exists, but don't expect to get like a 34, 32 mil, what is it, coral red OP. But you know, some weird
They're
ladies
gone anyway.
watch. Yeah, yeah. Oh, they're discontinued. Okay. Yeah. So no, weird stuff you can get it, and it also depends a bit on the dealers, right? And I think yeah, on the ADs, and I think this is also something that Goldberg always said. I think you most of the time you're better off if you go to a mom and pop shop, right? Because the chains, and we got the largest AD chain here. It's ridiculous, right? I mean, even
Yeah.
if you have buying history and stuff, and yeah, I'm on the
Another.
lookout for one watch. I'm waiting for one more Rolex, and I think I'm more or less done. And it's,
Oh,
I mean, the
that's
the
what we
hoops
always
you have
say.
to jump through. Exactly, exactly.
Always, man. I've had so many. I've had so many. Oh, just that one watch will do it. That was like 3 watches ago. Um, what are you
And
waiting
then in
for?
one month is watches and sorry.
What I was going to say, what watch are you waiting for? You want to reveal that?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Daytona, and the one that I want is the yellow gold one with the Paul Newman dial. I think that's a sleeper in my opinion. Going back to the John Mayer story, I still don't get it. That's vastly overrated in my opinion. I don't make music, and I'm not famous as he is, but I call
Yeah, I,
BS
I
on
think
that
he
one.
just brought it to people's attention. And I think that coupled with as eye-catching as that watch is, I mean, think about it. It's gold. It's got that almost garish green dial that's both beautiful and garish. And
Yeah,
it's just, if you're looking to flex, like that is the watch to do it with. It's one of the watches. I mean, there are a couple
yeah,
Rolexes that flex well, but I mean, that's a very eye-catching watch, and you're definitely going to stand out across the room as like a dude with a really good watch, and that can't be overstated. But
yeah.
one thing I was going to say is we were talking about how the ADs when pieces do come in, they're going to continue this and not put them out. Part of that will be denial, and part of it will be a strategy. But another thing that I think is part of the strategy is they're going to try to the term upsell. They're going to try to downsell. I just made that up. Okay, what that means is you walk in and you're a guy looking for a watch. Well, they're going to say, okay, well, what about this date just? And you get, yeah, I'm not really into Datejust. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, Datejust, I mean, there's nothing in the case. 36 millimeter steel Datejust. Wow. Okay, I'm going to jump on it. But there are some people that are going to say, nah, I don't really want the Datejust, and say, okay, well, what about, let's check back in the back and see what else we have. Well, what about this Explorer, right? Nah, I don't really want an Explorer. Okay, well, what about this Explorer too? Nah, I don't really want that. They keep trying to sell you the lesser piece and sort of work their way up. Now, eventually,
Absolutely.
they're not going. Now, eventually, they're going to look at you and say, "Look, you ain't going to get yourself. You're not going to know your way to a GMT Master 2. It's just not going to happen." But this happened actually with Marcelo. Marcelo was shopping with his wife, and so they took out it was some sort of Oyster Perpetual, is a 31 millimeter, and they said they didn't want it, and so then they came out with a 36 millimeter two tone. Which, think about it, 31 millimeter Oyster Perpetual is quite a bit below the 36 millimeter two tone. And so, it's interesting because I wonder if he had said, "No, I don't really want the two-tone either." I wonder if they would have come out with like the steel 36. So that's
I think they
it.
will do that 100%,
Yeah,
100%. And then, I mean, that's exactly, again, 10 years ago, okay, they have to guide, but I asked for the Daytona, for the friend, told me 6 months. It was 3 months, right? So they can only keep the dream alive for so long, and that's exactly what they will be doing, of course. Yeah.
yeah, but it depends on the model because the Dream will always be alive with the Daytona, the Sub, and the GMT. I think those are
Yeah.
the three watches that. Oh, and the Sky Dweller, of course. But yeah,
Yeah.
Date Just not so much. Ladies Pieces not so much.
And I said before, that's the last piece, but in a month there's Watches and Wonders, and I'll try to be there as well, and I'll try to go the first day this time around, and that's going to be really really interesting because 60th anniversary for the Daytona, 70th anniversary for the Sub, so you can speculate about all of that stuff, and that might change my one more watch and I'm done sort of thing.
Interesting. Wow. So a couple anniversary
And OP, I
events.
think, as well, even. I don't even
I
care about this one, but
You want to throw out like are you in the middle of the presentation, right? Are there more slides? Because I was going to go off on a tangent and say, do you want to make any
no, no, I think,
predictions?
listen, it's 100 slides, so I think we're going to send out the PhD certificates to all the people in the live chat. That
All right.
concludes the presentation.
Yeah, just send me an email and we'll send your certificate. You're now doctors of Rolex. Um, so yeah, do you think that there's going to
We can
be
get
like
rid of it if you want, is what I'm saying.
do you think there's going to be a Daytona? I mean, like anniversary, or you said it was a sub anniversary? I guess. Let's see, it's
It's
2023.
a, it's the 60th anniversary of the
Sub came out in
Daytona 7.
54, right?
Nah, they also use the 53. I
Oh, I'm
think
thinking of
both
GMT.
dates are.
Right. 53. Okay.
No, no, no. I think the Sub indeed something happened in 54 as well, but they use 53 as I
Okay.
understood at least. So Daytona
Mhm.
60th, Submariner 70th, and I've heard OP. I think I'm not sure, but I don't really care too much about it.
Yeah,
And it's going to be, I always tell you, there's lots and lots of stuff to talk about. And my number one topic, if I can say one thing, Austin,
go ahead.
if you don't mind. The key question to me is with the Daytona, the current one has been produced in steel since 2016. The old one was produced for much longer, and the one before that as well. So I don't see a need for them to change it. I hope they're not going to increase the size. And also the movement, the 4130, first in-house chrono movement was introduced in 2000. So it's 23 years old, but
Oh,
I'm not a movement guy, but it's a really, really, really good chrono movement. Column wheel, vertical clutch, 70 or 72 hours power reserve. I think it's the one that basically, even though it's so old, it checks all the boxes. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they will do. And my base case is they only introduce a new platinum one, which I hopefully don't like.
mhm.
But yeah, so I think it's really interesting. And same for the Sub, right? Because the Sub, they reintroduced the whole lineup in 2020. And back in the day, they would roll out first the precious metal, year later the two-tone, and then the steel. With the Sub, they did it boom all at once. So I don't know if you want to pull that up or different story for a different day, but you're the
Yeah, I think
boss
it
anyway.
is. But I will say that let me ask you, what's the hairspring in the 4130 movement, the Daytona movement? Does that have the blue
The
parachrome
Parachrome
spring?
Blue, oh yes, since a long time. The 4130 was also it's the same movement since the year 2000, but they had quietly they improved the movement and made a couple of small changes, two or three changes along the way. But that movement certainly nowadays has the Parachrome hairspring.
Here, I'm
Yeah,
gonna. Oh, it does have the parachrome
yeah, yeah,
hairspring.
yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. So, before we wrap it up, let me just say a couple things about what I think is coming. I don't want to blow too much because, like, I have a video coming that I actually already shot, and I just need to edit it, and it's probably going to come out maybe tonight. But I don't. Okay, I don't think Rolex looks at anniversaries as much as we think they do. They did with the 50th anniversary of the of the Submariner, but they totally snubbed the Explorer too, and it was a 70-year anniversary for that. So I think Rolex is really conservative with those sort of special events, and I think they really like the round numbers, 100, 50. I don't think that there's going to be any sort of anniversary. This is just, and I'm just saying this because of what they didn't do with the Explorer too. We didn't get anything. No acknowledgement of that. They just came out with a regular model. No green accents, no two-tone, nothing. Yes, the two-tone Explorer, but that's completely different than the Explorer 2. And so, yeah, if I had to put my money down, I would say Daytona, maybe an update, but nothing special, nothing like green or anything like that, green accents, anything like that. And then the 70s, the 70th anniversary of this sub, I don't think they're going to do that either. I really think they're sort of a round number company where 50 years, yes, 100 years, yes, but 70, 60, I think I don't think they do it like that. So that's just
As
yeah.
I salute that, and I hope that's what will happen. And I said that before, Austin. Maybe you remember. I don't think we need new groundbreaking releases every year. I mean, we always talk about those watches being iconic. Well, then let
Mhm.
them be iconic. If they unofficially introduce rules, right? This watch on that bracelet, this watch in this color, this one only like this, and then they play with it, right? So if you think about I hate the name, but Batman, Batgirl, that was a
Mhm.
new thing to do. And the Sprite, in my opinion, I hate that watch, but they shouldn't do that. They should stop it, because the more they do, the more novelties like that they introduce, the less, the more they basically hurt the iconic status and the value of the brand. My opinion. I know yours is probably different, but I think it would be a good thing if
Mhm.
they would say, "Hey, Daytona, you platinum one, done. Submariner, you already got your Cermet, done. Good night. See you next year." Sorry, I
Yeah.
hope I didn't hijack now your upcoming video. Sorry, we can
No,
change the
no,
topic
no,
or we
no. This is really interesting. But yeah, I wanted to say something else. My train of thought, but um, oh yeah, okay. I remember what I was going to say. I was going to say that Rolex is in a situation where they don't need to do anything, and they sort of have to update because we expect something every year. So they have to give us something. They can't just sit on their hands. But at least here in Japan, every single one of their watches sells out. So, why would you want to tweak or change anything? You would want to keep all of those, pretty much every sort of visual change in your back pocket for the future when you might need it. When you might need a bump in sales, when things aren't going quite as well as they are in 2023, which they couldn't go better for Rolex than these past couple of years. And so that's why I think we're going to see very few uh, changes. And also, and again, I'm encroaching on my own video that I'm going to release later, but I don't think they want what happened with the Hulk, where the Hulk was discontinued and people clamored for it, and it sort of detracted from the Cermet. It's almost like, guys, we just released the Cermet. Hey, I mean, I know it's the end of the Hulk, but Cermet, guys, Cermet, probably Rolex is thinking that, and I think that's why at this point they they probably don't like the idea that their discontinued watches could potentially do better or get more traction or more attention than their modern watches. And so I think that uh, you're going to see little tweaks, but nothing revolutionary. And I point to the Explorer too, because it would have been a whole different thing if they had come out with a ceramic bezeled Explorer 2. It would have really, the discontinued Explorer 2 with the metal bezel would have become really collectible. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, it would have shot up. And if you had speculated on that, then you probably would have really have been glad you did. But but that's not the case. And so what we got is we got a new Explorer 2 that almost everybody with the previous 42 millimeter Explorer 2 would want to upgrade to, because visually there's no difference, and you would just want the upgraded movement. And so I think with Rolex, I think you will see moves that basically just alpha male, the new watches alpha male their older watch, which should be the case. But by alpha male, I mean just like no visual changes, just an upgrade that anybody with that previous version would say, damn, I really wish I had the new version, because everything else is equal. And I want the latest and greatest. So I think they kind of learned their lesson with the Hulk. And I don't think they're gonna do that again. So I think they're gonna keep. I think they're gonna keep everything pretty much uniform until something changes. That's in their best interest. Like I said, keep all of those visual changes for when they need them. They don't need them now. They don't need to do anything. So why innovate when you don't need to?
Exactly. And maybe two things: if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
I also think, compare Rolex and Omega. It's a bit like, I'm gonna go off on a tangent that I'm not an expert on, but it's like the iPhone and Android. The iPhone doesn't always have the latest tech, but the overall package is the best, right? And so they don't need to make it better every day, every year. They'll make a huge leap at some point if it's necessary, and they don't need it now. And they know exactly which buttons to press to have everyone go crazy. Well, what I thought about the other day is, if they would introduce, Daytona aside, if they would introduce a GMT or a sub with all the new tech that we currently have, but in the size format of the pre-ceramics, let's say 16710, but with the new bracelet class and in that size, people would go nuts.
They would.
Absolutely nuts.
Absolutely.
And they know that, right?
Yeah. Again,
they're not going to do
those are things in their back pocket. They'd be crazy to mess with their perfect formula now, and that is unfortunate for us because we like new things. But again, yeah, I mean, just strategically speaking, you get little upgrades, like for example, the crown guards on the Air King, just a little, just to make it better, just to, like I said, alpha male that old one, so people go to the new one. Yeah. So let me drop your channel in the comment, and guys, you can click on Brian's channel, become a subscriber. His content is very underrated, and you can sort of watch the streamlined version of what he introduced today. And again, it's just a really well thought out, very high effort video. So Brian, thank you. And anything you want to say before we cut it?
No, I said wait enough. I think, no, I want to thank you, Austin. I mean, I reached out, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. And yeah, we'll speak soon.
Absolutely. Anytime. We'll try to do more live shows. I'm talking to my viewers now. We'll try to do more live shows. I'm probably going to reboot the live show channel just to interact. I didn't do a lot of interacting with the viewers today, and that's always kind of fun. And perhaps drop the link so people can jump on. I'd like to get back into that, and so kind of look out for that. And we'll have more, I don't know, just a more all over the place discussion perhaps next time. But I want to thank again, Brian, for coming, and thank you everybody for showing up. Wes is here. Tracy. These are people I know from, I know Wes in my real life. And I've talked to a lot of these people. I've seen these people in the comments of my videos. So I want to thank everybody for showing up, and Brian, thank you again for coming. Okay.
Thank you, Austin. We speak soon. Have a good one.
Take care. You too. All right, guys. Have a good one. I'll see you on the next live show, whenever that is.